The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Michelle Hrycauk Nassif is the founder of I Am a Feminine Leader, helping women identify, articulate, and embody their unique feminine leadership style so they can project their leader's voice, transform lived experiences into powerful lessons, and take inspired action, all with the goal of creating more meaningful lives for themselves and their families. As a stay-at-home mom turned founder, Michelle transitioned back into the workforce during the pandemic and knows intimately the struggles all parents face with managing career and home life. Through coaching, mentorship, and her I Am Editorials project, Michelle encourages both men and women to connect intimately with their feminine power. Michelle and I first met in 2019 when she was leading a group of administrative professionals from her Edmonton home. We have since become great friends and unshakable allies. Our conversation was recorded from her new home in Puerto Rico just as she started an intentional pause from social media early in December. She may be on a pause from posting publicly, but Michelle's purpose as a connector is clear. And as you'll hear in this conversation, her passion for leaders to support the connectors on their teams is strong. Welcome back, everyone, to the Connector Next Door. And you and I, Michelle, we met when you were living in Edmonton here in Alberta, Canada. But you are coming to us from Puerto Rico today. And we have often teased how I have teased how I am living vicariously through your beach life. But I know that it isn't all just play for you there. I'm really looking forward to the conversation about connection today and what it means to you. Welcome here. So glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And yes, the beach life has its nuances. So definitely get into it together.
You are currently, as an entrepreneur, living and working down there with your family and your girls. And the way that you're navigating all of the changes and have been navigating these changes in your life and the connections in your life, it's been really cool to watch how you've been able to navigate that. And it seems actually come closer and closer to yourself through the process. Maybe we can start with your version of the question, what does connection mean to you? That's where I love to start all of these conversations because it'll be interesting, I think, for the ones listening today to hear your perspective on what connection means.
Yeah, and connection for me really means resonance, because that's been my experience my whole life is whenever I have interacted with others, been a part of groups or organizations, relationships, like everything aligned when there was resonance of emotion, resonance of impact, resonance of feeling seen and heard. And I have memories of being as young as 8 years old, being an active community member and having that awareness of what it means to truly be seen and heard by others and to be remembered, and not just remembered, but like fondly remembered, and not just like a week later, but like years later. And so for me, connection is that resonance piece is that piece that you carry with you always. And you can have, finite connections here or there. You go to the grocery store, you talk to the cashier, or you drop your kid at school, or you do whatever, and those are like connections too. But real connection for me is like our relationship. Like we've maintained a great relationship this last year and a half, being on two sides of the planet.
That's right.
And then also, being able to call up a friend after 6 months or a few years of no correspondence and picking up right where we left off.
Yeah. I love the word resonance because really when you're talking about years later, isn't that the point? Because if something's resonating, not always can we put our finger on it exactly what it looks like or what it feels like, but it's there. and that it can transcend any kind of age or sort of our stage in life, that the resonance and that connection that's built is just part of us. It's just part of how we show up. And I think what we can also give to other people. And I know that you are a community builder. So this is something that is part of your professional life, not even just in this last year, but you have been doing this for years and years. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and your desire to bring people together in kind of that community format? So there's a system to it, and you are a coach and a trainer, and you're somebody that has all sorts of great material on this. Tell us a little bit about your work and how does that sort of lend itself to building great communities as well?
At 8 years old, I was active in my community. I was a youth leader. I participated in a youth group in my school all throughout high school. I organized retreats. I did fundraising and community service. And that was all influenced by my grandmother because she was a leader in our community as well. And she was the one that inspired me to do that. And so, in my adolescence, from a very young age, it was instilled in me the power of leadership and the power that an individual has in making a greater impact. And so as my professional career started to develop and grow, I brought that to every role that I had. And even though I had a couple pivots professionally, that is something that I brought to every role, was that connection piece, being that connector. And that resonated with clients and stakeholders and distributors and, like managers and teams. And at the stage of life that I'm at now, what I've come to realize is that, the leadership capabilities that I possess naturally as a human being are really what is going to sustain me for the future. It has nothing really to do with the education that I have or the lack of education or the companies that I worked for in the past. I have a very acute awareness today in this moment that if I don't nurture and support and really share my leadership, then I'm not going to have the future that I could have otherwise. And I think that for people who are maybe in career transition or who are, wondering what their next chapter will be, if you have that remembrance of who you are as a human and the natural gifts that you possess, that is what will carry you forward. Mm-hmm. And when we embody our authentic selves, that is when we just naturally build and design communities, because we attract like-minded people, we foster connection, we are creative, and we create solutions, projects. So it's really so much deeper than like the surface level of, oh, I'm a community builder, or I'm a partnership manager or an activator. Those are just titles. It's so much deeper than that.
Yeah. And the titles we give ourselves, I think sometimes are for external, either validation or external sort of an understanding that people can say or put us into a place where they understand what we do and how we're going to help. What I love about what you're saying here is that it's so much greater. And sometimes we actually don't even know what the community is going to look like until we start putting ourselves authentically out there. And like you say, start attracting people to not just the work we do, but who we are. And then what can we build together? Is that what you're finding when you start to work with a community where it's like, oh, we're all here together and we love being with each other. What can we do?
Absolutely. I agree. Yes. Because I believe, and I'm sure you would agree, like that connectors are people who are collaborative, people who see possibilities and want to execute on those possibilities. They want to explore them, so we can be solutionists and problem solvers, but we are not, the be all end all. We're not the means to an end. Like, we are the people that bring others together. We are the ones that cultivate and nurture and build. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's so fundamental that all teams and all organizations really nurture and value connectors as a skill set, because there are always going to be people on your team that are really analytical, really good at follow through and closing things and doing things. And we need those people. Those people are essential. But we also need the visionaries, the connectors, and the planners. So as a connector, if you're able to identify, I always ask people, where do you fall? Where would your skill set, or where do you believe you would fall into the life cycle of a project? Because if you can identify which phase of project management, if you will, that you would excel at, then that is how you can identify the type of connector that you are, and where you can where you can create the most impact in everything that you do.
That's such an interesting point, to value those natural connectors on your team and empower them to do more of that. And they will be the ones that won't leave you in the dust, because they want to make the connection. And I see that in your work all the time, Michelle, where you're looking at and you're so curious about, and you're trying to figure out, okay, what is this body over here? So there's this group, and they happen to be women, and they are doing something like this. And you're really getting into what is it that they're about, and what are they trying to accomplish? And then you turn your sights to, then who else? Like, who else can be either a match for that, or a complementary type of service or offering or group that could be working together with them. So it goes beyond just building one community that we all enjoy being together, and we're doing something cool over here because we're resonating with each other and it makes sense. But it's also about expanding and scaling and growing from there.
Absolutely. And especially as it relates to business development, because a lot of business leaders, CEOs that I've worked with are hyper focused on their competition, and they're not necessarily exploring possibilities. Collaboration is kind of scary for them at times, because they're scared of sharing too much of themselves because of their competitive advantage. And so having what I call myself like the objective third party, right? Like, I'm the objective person, right?
Right.
So I work with the CEO, or I work with the business leader, and I am the gatekeeper of their organization. But I also am the person that vets and researches and recruits and onboards the people that are going to provide the most benefit, right? And I've worked in situations where the objective of our arrangement was very self-interested. And I've also worked in situations where it was more community focused. So there's nothing wrong with having a community strategy that is self-interested for your organization or for the designated community that you're in. But I just think that it's important to bring an awareness of the fact that the principles are not very different. Right? Like, the relationship management piece is not very different, because as a connector myself, I am a hub, right? I consider myself to be a hub. So even though I might work with however many clients over the years, or wherever, or however many organizations, I am a hub of connections and relationships. And so it has happened with every single role that I've had, where I have pulled and extracted resources and people and connections from previous roles or organizations into what I'm doing in the present moment. And that is also a part of the unique skill set that I bring, because I am completely connected, interconnected all the time. And that resonance piece is what allows me to kind of with ease, bring ideal partners and sponsors in, because that relationship has already been set and is in motion. Like, it's not, like I just did, one event with you 5 years ago and we never spoke again. There's a whole relationship management piece behind it, which is a natural part of my skill set, which is a natural part of who I am. So
that's right.
You know what I mean? And that's
totally.
That's what I'm saying. Like, these are the types of people that organizations need, because not everybody has that skill set. And that's perfectly okay. But when people like me work with the closers and the executors, stuff gets done. Like, big stuff gets done.
It does. And I think there's an element of trust that needs to be there as well, because not every connection you have will fit with your present day client or with what they're wanting to do. And I've been in that situation where years ago, when I had a sales role, and they said, well, we hired you for your Rolodex back in the day. There used to be Rolodexes. Look it up if you don't know what it is. But it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm like, well, I'm not just going to pass sort of my book of of past contacts to you, and then you can do whatever you want. When I was hired for that particular position, it was really important to me that the people that I was working with felt cared for. Taking care of these relationships is what I see you doing, where you are coming as a professional, you show up with everything you've got, and you want to care for these relationships in ways that people will want to engage with. If you suggest something, that is probably a good thing because you've got their best interests at heart. So I'd love to chat with you about, I know that you don't just work with women entrepreneurs, women business owners, CEOs, but you have just come to the last of your editorials. So you had 12 editorials telling your story, a little bit about yourself, a lot about yourself, your professional journey, your personal journey. But when we're talking about these connections, do you find, as somebody that has put I Am a Feminine Leader out there, as your website and who you are, and these editorials that you've been doing monthly, do you find that women show up differently when they're trying to connect with others? Are they more attuned to being a connector and allowing that to be part of, like you say, your skill set?
Yeah, I think that women, and I'm speaking based on my experience and what I know to be true in general terms, but it's not necessarily true for every woman, but based on my experience is that women have a tendency to not show up authentically in all aspects of their life because of the demands and the pressures that are put on them to perform and to assimilate and to be adaptable in their environments. And so, in my personal case, being a new mom in the workforce, of course I felt that. I felt that I couldn't express myself as a mother at the workplace. Not because of direct discrimination or anything like that. My employers were always very supportive people, but there's definitely, little microaggressions that would be happening here and there as it related to me being a parent, or even just, the social stereotypes around working moms and professional women in leadership roles. I think that women, we have to invest in cultivating our own sense of leadership, our own sense of identity, so that we can overcome those stereotypes and those challenges, because they will always be present. But what is unique and rare is our gift of leadership to the world. So when we feel confident and we feel at peace and at ease with who we are as human beings, then all of those other things don't affect us as much, or they may not affect us at all. And then that is when the real impact occurs. So my editorials for myself was a creative expression of all of the lived experiences that I believe truly shaped and helped me evolve past those challenges, shaped me into my higher self. And all human beings have lived experiences that do that for themselves. So I literally just took, a creative expression of writing, so that I could share what I inherently consider to be my knowledge or my wisdom that I could express and share with the world. I have 2 daughters who are a witness to my life, but they're also too young to fully understand or comprehend the impact of those lessons. In that process of creating my editorials, I also had them in mind. Even though mothers of daughters or mothers of sons may have lessons that they want to share with their children, they may want to model behaviors or model a lifestyle to their children. It's really hard to do that when they're young. It's really hard to do that when they're teens, so do it for yourself first. Do it for yourself. Model self-love, model compassion, model courage and bravery and authenticity for yourself. And when your children are ready, when they're open and willing to receive that, they will.
And when you're talking, it's interesting to me when you're talking about women, and I would have guessed the opposite is true, but I think you're right. Embracing themselves as that natural connector, which is quite empowering when you think about it, when you are the one reaching out and leaning forward into a relationship, trying to connect the dots, and there can be this innate, beautiful power in that, in being able to see something bigger birthed from a connection that's been made. But maybe as women, we downplay it. And I know you work with several different women's groups and you're a mentor and coach in some of these groups. And to get that perspective that maybe women do struggle. If women do feel a little more sort of behind the scenes, or they're holding themselves back, or they're in that performance mode, or they're trying to be, I wouldn't say necessarily perfect, but perfect for what they feel will be accepted. Do you find that some women, when they do embrace who they are authentically, how they show up, they're surprising themselves with what's possible? Do you see that in some of your work?
Yes, absolutely. It's such a critical part of a woman's journey to affirm her leadership, because again, not to characterize all women, but based on my experience and my own lived experience, it's very common that, we associate ourselves and define ourselves purely on external validation, whether it be the titles that we hold, the income that we earn, whether we're working or not, where we live, all of those things. And those things create biases that influence how we exist in the world. It influences how people see us. If you can express who you are from a heart-centered space and be comfortable with that, regardless of what your circumstances are, then people will sense that energy coming from you. And that doesn't require any money. It doesn't require a job or a title. It just requires your life force energy being free to flow and exist with peace. Mm-hmm. And that was my experience as a stay-at-home mom, because for years I held myself back, like subconsciously, I held myself back from moving forward because I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like I was a valuable asset to the workforce. And I told myself all of these stories based on the narratives and the stereotypes about stay-at-home moms. And I allowed them to influence my belief about myself and what my potential was. And it was only when I started unlearning and really practicing acceptance and radical self-love for myself did I actually build a company and start working freelance for clients all over the world. And it just really blew my mind when I was reflecting on it recently. And I was like, wow, like so many people in my circle thought I was unemployable. They thought there was something wrong with me, that it was taking me so long to transition back to the workforce. When the reality was that I was my own worst enemy. And I was fighting against a current where, as if I just rode the wave of who I was in the moment and really leaned into it, then I wouldn't have gone through all of that. Or maybe it wouldn't have taken as long. So, and that's how I feel with, with the whole connection piece in organizations as well, is creating safety for those feelings and emotions and perspectives to flow, because there can be so much hindrance and resistance when you're working in teams, and that can prevent progress. So connectors are really the stewards of positive vibes and positive energy in teams and organizations, because not a lot of people feel safe or feel welcome or accepted in expressing that. And sometimes all it is about is just getting it out there, having a quick discussion or having it heard and be validated for it to be able to not hinder anymore. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. It
makes so much sense. I wish I could just repeat that again, but that they are the stewards. Did you say stewards? That to me is such a beautiful way of looking at it, is that there's a very unique space for the connector, the person that is able to see maybe what others can't see in the moment, and that connector can be that person that keeps everybody sort of in the flow and moving forward and feeling like they've been seen. You are in a space right now, which I would love to maybe just go there before we wrap up today, because I think this is so important. You've just started, just in this last 3 days, I guess it's been, just now, you've just started a disconnection. I think it's a month, you said, that you're going to be off of social media and just spend some time disconnecting. I'd love for you to dig in a little bit for us, because someone like you, for the people that are listening, they might think, well, how is that even possible to disconnect? And what does that actually look like? From the outside, it looks like, oh, she's just not on social media anymore. But I know it goes deeper for you when you talk about disconnecting. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? What led you to this decision to take some time away? What do you do when you're disconnecting?
Sure. And, I just want to put it out there for everybody who is kind of like squinting their brow right now, like wondering what's going on, is that it's actually really quite simple. For me, it means deleting apps from my phone. And it also means being intentional about it. I think that when we're intentional and we engage our community in the process, then it also feels nourishing. And it doesn't leave our audience as well wondering what's going on. Like we're creating that wake of resonance by being intentional and engaging our audiences. So yes, 3 days ago, I put a post on Instagram and I just explained, I said, there's a lot of stuff happening in my life, and I have some dreams that need tending to. I have some goals I want to achieve. My family's in transition, and I've had too much screen time this year and not enough me time. It was simple as that, And so for me to be an effective connector, I need that time to disconnect, to focus inward, so that I can show up as my best self. And social media is something that when I was 8 years old, didn't really exist. So, my community building cycles and how I was as a community builder when I was 8, it was like, go, go, go during the school year, lots of exciting things to do and to plan. And then over the summer, I would barely see my friends from school. I would just hang out with my family, go to the lake, have downtime. There was no youth meetings, no retreats. And with social media, unless you intentionally pause, delete, it doesn't stop. So I have to do that for myself occasionally. And I call it an intentional pause, right? That's what I call it. Mm-hmm. But the last intentional pause that I did was I had just had my first daughter, and I was working full time, but I was also studying. And I was really like, I want to finish this program. Like, I need to finish it. And I'm a new mom and I'm working, and I'm just like, it's too much to be thinking about all of this other stuff happening in everybody else's lives. And it can sound a little selfish. I mean, for some people, they kind of wonder like, oh, you're being selfish. You don't want to you didn't see my post, or you didn't do this and that. And I'm like, but I literally don't have enough bandwidth for all of it. So the last intentional pause that I took was 6 years long. But I still had really meaningful connections in the process. It was just not public, and it wasn't on social media. So, so for any of those people out there listening who are entrepreneurs or business owners, or, because this is something that comes up a lot with my work when I work with CEOs and business leaders, is that they are literally drained by the demands of social media just to operate their businesses, is finding ways to integrate those intentional pauses and make it a part of your engagement strategy. Because no human being can be online and happy and giddy and selling and winning all the time.
Right. Including that as part of how we structure life, how we structure our businesses, I think is so incredibly valuable. I'm just listening to a book called Backable right now, and there is a story of a chef, and I don't have the name on the top of my head, but a chef who actually takes, I believe it's 3 months away. They closed the restaurant for 3 months, and it's every year. They did it, I think, out of necessity to start, kind of like what you did, where it's like, I just can't handle it all. I'm gonna take a break or make decisions on what I'm going to be investing in. And now they do it yearly because they found that the creativity went up, people's energy went up, the motivation to create new dishes went up, their morale and the team environment was healthier when they came back. And there was some anticipation from their customers that it was what's going to be revealed when they open up again. And I think if we think of it that way for ourselves too, that when we're taking others on that journey with us, so not to just, fall off the face of the earth and ghost people. And, that's a whole other podcast. But I honestly believe that you taking this intentional time will help be that example to others as well, where especially as women, and I know you as a feminine leader and you've got big goals and a lot of things that you're shooting for and you're excited about the future, that we can actually make the decision to take the time for ourselves, take the time to focus on something, one thing or a couple of things that will help move us forward. What an encouragement, I think, to people that are listening to this, that are highly driven, they want to make an impact in their worlds. What would it look like for you, do you think, if more people were to take that direction where they're getting that rhythm, where you've got that disconnection? We talk a lot about these concepts having a wider impact, a global impact. What would that mean in our societies and our communities if people would be intentional about connecting and disconnecting in that way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, for me, that's an emotional question because it brings up, emotion in me when I think about that, because, just facing the reality of how desensitized we've all become because of technology and because of social media. You read a headline and it doesn't even faze you. You scroll through a feed and nothing really lands or touches your heart. And that's really, I think the impact that having that intentional pause has is because for ourselves, for us as individuals, if the power of putting your devices away for even just a day, if you can do it one day a week for the rest of the year, and every moment that you feel triggered or you feel tempted to grab it, feel your hand. I do this a lot, with my fingers, I rub my fingers. And because, with the phones, you're always scrolling with your fingers and your thumbs and stuff. It's all about cultivating an awareness of the somatics of how you're feeling in every moment, right? So if you're feeling kind of twitchy and oh, I want to get my phone, it's well, why? Feel into your body. Why? Where's that resistance? Where's that energy living in your body? And can you nurture that a little bit? And for me, it's always in my hands. It's in my hands. So I'll rub my fingers together. I'll close my eyes and I'll just feel the texture of my fingerprints, and I'll feel the shape of my fingers and my knuckles. I'll measure mentally the distance between, my fingernail and my knuckle or my palm. And I'll just bring my focus inward for just a moment, even if it's just a moment. And then I realize that all of the energy, all of that I needed, I already have, and I don't need to reach outside of myself for it. And that, I think, is what, being aware and taking that pause can do for you. And then that awareness, that calm, that acuteness of a feeling of your environment, that's how you impact your organization, your teams. And that resonates with other people and inspires them.
Using that was such a beautiful example. And I was doing that as you're discussing or chatting through that with us. But wouldn't that be amazing if we were able to, in our teams, be the one to take the pause?
When you are able to identify that flow of energy within yourself, and when you can be attuned to it, then you are going to be able to witness and be attuned to that energy in others. And that's where the stewardship piece comes in. Because as a connector, when you're in a team or if you're in an organization where you can understand people on a holistic level, you can understand the work that they do, you can understand their family dynamics, understand their personalities, but when you can also understand the energy that is in an environment or in a person, that can completely change the way you interact with them. And we do tend to get hyper-focused on metrics and, surface level interactions and things like that in the workplace. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but when it becomes the dominant force behind the work that you do, then it's not really conducive to fostering that feeling of connection. And so like you were saying with how, we don't want to look at the future right now. We want to be in the present moment. Absolutely. And we do need to analyze and understand and forecast and strategize for the future. But when we do it from a state of presence, it also influences the projections and the forecasts, right?
Yeah.
So that's a whole other can of worms. but I'm just saying, for all those people out there who are very analytical thinkers, people who are very they're quite logical in the way that they exist and they work and they lead.
Mm-hmm.
Don't lose that. We need people like that. And it's just, I guess, an encouragement for them to say, if you're in a situation where you're not getting the results or you're not having the success that you were anticipating because of those projections or forecasts, then come back to presence and explore that. Because the only moment, Eckhart Tolle would tell you, the only moment that matters, that is real, is now.
Right.
Right?
And I'd love to end there, because I think when we talk about what this can look like for us, it really doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And when we allow ourselves to take the time to connect well, be conscious and present in our connections at the moment, and then willing and able to disconnect and know that there's going to be more to come and that we'll be able to invest more, to give more, and to see more, I think, as well, when we re-engage. I think that's so important. Now, I understand that you are still available for people to reach out to you, even though you are not on social media right now. Would you be willing to share with us how people can find you and continue this conversation in the months to come?
Yeah, so everyone can go to my website. It's www.iamafeminineleader.com. And you can send an email to me through the website. You can also get my email information from LinkedIn. I have my email listed there. I guess I periodically will check in, maybe once every, week, or I'll just pop in for 2 seconds, just in case, someone from my family has something to say. Mostly with email, but email is the best way to get through to me right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on connection, because I know we've known each other a long time. We've had so much of this conversation over the last year and a half, and I'm really excited that you're an intricate part of the Connection Architect program that's coming up in 2022. You will have so much to offer the connectors in that group in the months to come. Thank you. I think if we took even just a few bits and pieces of this and took some time today to think about where does that matter in our lives, how can that change things for us, it'll make a big difference. Thanks so much for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.